Welcome to the Flight Radio Telephone Operator Exam Prep Part 3. This is the final part. And as usual, at the end there will be a separate video which contains the Part 3 exam questions and answers. So, radio procedures at a controlled aerodrome. At busy aerodromes with high traffic volumes, air traffic control is used to provide an aerodrome control service. ATC is therefore responsible for issuing clearances, instructions and information to prevent collisions and achieve separation between your aircraft and other aircraft or wake turbulence, etc. A controlled aerodrome will have a tower included in the information block on the aeronautical charts in the AIP NZ Volume 4. In the examples next, note the order of the readback wording. These are typical exam questions. 8.6.1 Taxi instructions in a controlled aerodrome. Taxi instructions issued by a controller will always contain a clearance limit, which is the point at which the aircraft must stop unless further permissions are given. This is highlighted in green because it is a typical exam question. Taxi instructions may also include a taxi route. If a taxi clearance contains a limit beyond a runway, it will contain an explicit clearance to cross that runway or an instruction to hold short of that runway. This will include unlit runways at night and runways that are promulgated as closed or not available. A clearance to cross must be requested if one has not been given. Instructions must be read back, including the Q&H. Again, highlighted in green because it's a typical exam question. Pilots of departing aircraft must include in the radio call for taxi, call sign, position on the aerodrome, intentions, persons on board, ATIS. If no ATIS is available, ATC will give you the weather and runway information anyway. Conditional clearances. Conditional clearances affecting the active runway will only be used when both the pilot and the controller have the conflicting traffic in sight, and the traffic causing the conditional clearance is the first to pass the affected aircraft. In other words, ATC will not ask a pilot to wait for the third aircraft to land and then proceed as cleared. It will always give you the indication as, please spot this traffic and then follow on from this traffic. When the conditional clearance involves a departing aircraft and an arriving aircraft, or two departing aircraft, the clearance will be given as follows. Call sign, the condition, the clearance, a brief reiteration of the clearance. For example, tower will say, Juliet Echo November, report the Dash 8 on final in sight. You in turn will respond, Dash 8 in sight, Juliet Echo November. The tower will come back and confirm Juliet Echo November behind the landing Dash 8 on short final, line up behind. You'll respond behind the landing Dash 8, line up behind Juliet Echo November. Or for example, Echo Lima Alpha after departing 737, line up behind and wait. You will respond clarifying after departing 737, line up behind and wait Echo Lima Alpha. Takeoff clearances in controlled aerodromes. At busy aerodromes with separate ground and tower functions, aircraft are usually transferred to control tower or approaching the runway holding point. Since misunderstandings in the granting and acknowledgement of takeoff clearances can result in quite serious and catastrophic consequences, meticulous care has been taken to ensure that the phraseology which is to be employed during the pre-departure manoeuvres cannot be interpreted as a takeoff clearance. A takeoff clearance will include the runway designator. For traffic reasons, it may be necessary for the aircraft to take off immediately after lining up. If the word immediate is in the clearance, the controller is asking the pilot to take off without delay if it is safe to do so. If unable to comply, your aircraft must be kept off the runway and the tower advised. So for example, Kilo Alpha Zulu, runway 09 cleared for takeoff. You'll respond, runway 09 cleared for takeoff, Kilo Alpha Zulu. For example, Delta Foxtrot Lima, runway 27, cleared for immediate takeoff. You will respond, runway 27, cleared for immediate takeoff, Delta Foxtrot Lima. Local departure instructions may be given with the takeoff clearance. Such instructions are normally given to ensure separation of aircraft operating in the vicinity of the aerodrome. For example, Echo Lima Alpha climbs straight ahead to 3,000 feet before turning right, runway 24 cleared for takeoff. You will respond by highlighting the important parts of that readback. Straight ahead to 3,000 feet, right turn, runway 24, cleared for takeoff, Echo Lima Alpha. For VFR departures, and in controlled aerodromes, departure clearance may include a CTR sector, a VFR departure procedure, or a plain language instruction. Aircraft must, on leaving the aerodrome traffic circuit, enter and remain within the lateral limits of any sector in that clearance, or follow the assigned route specified in the VFR departure procedure or the clearance. Altitude instructions are included in published VFR departure procedures. For example, Foxtrot Lima Charlie, leave control zone via Wanganui at 15,000 feet, VFR report to Rikina. You will respond, leave control zone via Wanganui at 15,000 feet, VFR, Wilco, Foxtrot Lima Charlie. Or, another example, Tower will say, Juliet Echo November, leave via Sinclair sector, special VFR, 1,500 feet or below. You will respond, leave via Sinclair sector, special VFR, 1,500 feet or below, Juliet Echo November. VFR arrivals in controlled aerodromes. The initial call to an aerodrome control requesting clearance to enter a control zone must be made in sufficient time to allow the controller to assess the VFR and IFR traffic situation and issue a clearance prior to the aircraft reaching the CTR boundary. That is another very, very common question and answer. Pilots must advise if they are to operate in special VFR conditions. Arrival clearances may include a CTR sector, a VFR arrival procedure, plain language instruction, or circuit joining instructions. Aircraft must remain within the lateral limits of any sector in the clearance, or follow the assigned route specified in the VFR arrival procedure or the clearance, and comply with circuit joining and reporting instructions. Altitude instructions are included in the published VFR arrival procedures. An example, Wellington Tower, Kilo Alpha Lima. Tower will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima, Wellington Tower. Kilo Alpha Lima, Haywards 2,500 feet, information Tango, QNH 1018 for landing POB 3. Kilo Alpha Lima, enter control zone via Petone sector 2,000 feet or below, holding at Point Howard. Enter control zone via Petone sector 2,000 feet or below, hold at Point Howard, Kilo Alpha Lima. Aerodrome traffic circuit in controlled aerodromes. Circuit joining instructions will be issued early enough to allow a pilot to sight other aircraft and position in a safe and orderly manner into the circuit. Tower will give you Romeo Oscar Charlie, join right hand downwind, runway 34, report sighting 737 downwind. You'll respond, right hand runway 24, 737 in sight, Romeo Oscar Charlie. Romeo Oscar Charlie, number 2, follow the 737. Number 2, Wilco, Romeo Oscar Charlie. Or, Mike Tango, join left base runway 16, number 2, follow Cherokee 3 mile final, report sighting. You'll respond, left base runway 16, number 2, Cherokee in sight, Mike Tango. You'll get confirmation readback from the tower, Mike Tango, roger. The pilot, having joined the traffic circuit, makes routine reports as required. The most common one is always downwind. Echo Lima Alpha downwind. Tower will respond, Echo Lima Alpha, number 2, follow Seneca on base. Number 2, traffic in sight, Echo Lima Alpha. It may be necessary in order to coordinate traffic in the circuit to issue delay or expedition instructions. This could include asking the pilot to orbit, extend downwind, or fly short final. Final approach and landings control zones, controlled aerodromes. If requested, a final report is made when an aircraft turns onto final approach. If the turn onto final is made at a distance greater than 4 miles from touchdown, a long final report is made. Landing clearance will include the runway designator. Juliet Echo November on final. Juliet Echo November, wind 27 degrees 7 knots, Seal 02 cleared to land. Seal 02 cleared to land, Juliet Echo November. In order to save taxi time, when flying training in a traffic circuit, pilots may request to carry out a touch and go. The touch and go clearance will include the runway designator. For example, Foxtrot Lima Charlie request touch and go. Foxtrot Lima Charlie, grass 02 cleared touch and go. You'll respond, grass 02 cleared touch and go, Foxtrot Lima Charlie. Always report back the clearance. If control is unable to let you carry out a touch and go for safety reasons, your request will be declined and you will have to make a full stop landing. If coming into land and control is aware of hazards to your flight, such as wind shear or wake turbulence, they will address your aircraft with the call sign, then the word caution, before letting you know what that caution or warning is. For example, Echo Lima Alpha, caution, wake turbulence 737 landing ahead. Your response is simply confirming you've received it. Echo Lima Alpha. Go-around procedures. A go-around can be instructed if the runway is not available for landing, or to ensure ATC separation, and to avert an unsafe situation. This means the pilot must not land but apply power, climb, entering the circuit, or as instructed by control. Any transmissions to aircraft should be brief and kept to a minimum during this time, as the pilot will be busy ensuring flight safety. Control will say, Kilo Alpha Zulu, go around aircraft on the runway. You'll respond, going around Kilo Alpha Zulu. If the pilot is aware of an unsafe situation, he or she can also initiate the go around procedure with the phrase, going around. For example, Echo Lima Alpha, going around. Tower will simply respond, Echo Lima Alpha, roger. After landing in controlled aerodromes. It is common for the tower to issue taxi instructions to an aircraft nearing the end of its landing roll. If these have not been issued, the pilot can ask for taxi instructions once ready in the final stages of the rollout. After landing, pilots must advise intended location on the aerodrome and obtain a taxi clearance. Remain on the aerodrome's tower frequency until clear of the runway in use. Then, unless otherwise instructed, contact Service Movement Control on the appropriate frequency for taxi instructions towards the end of the taxi roll. Delta Foxtrot Lima, take first right, Delta Foxtrot Lima. Once the runway has been vacated, you can then contact ground. Ground, Delta Foxtrot Lima, runway vacated, request taxi to stand 7. Ground will respond, Delta Foxtrot Lima, taxi to the Aero Club via taxiway Alpha. You'll confirm receiving clarity to the Aero Club via taxiway Alpha, Delta Foxtrot Lima. If ATC is off watch, the aerodrome becomes unattended, and unattended aerodrome procedures apply. The ATIS will state that ATC are off watch and uncontrolled airspace procedures are now in place in the airspace that was previously controlled. Hours of operation for each ATS are listed in the IAPs and often amended by the NOTAMs. The frequency may change, or it may be the same as it was when talking to control. However, as it is now uncontrolled, you would say Palmerston traffic, for example, instead of Palmerston Tower. Published hours for each aerodrome are based on the number and availability of staff and their duty time limits, the time of operation of regular air transport passenger services with an MCTOW over 5,700 kilograms, and special user requirements, for example, the Air Force or special events. Radio procedures at aerodromes with Aerodrome Flight Information Service is as follows. Aerodromes that do not have an ATC service are known as uncontrolled aerodromes. Some of the busier uncontrolled aerodromes, for example, Paraparaumu, have aerodrome flight service. AFIS provides information useful to pilots for the safe and efficient conduct of their flights. It differs from ATC services in that pilots being provided with AFIS are responsible for assessing a situation based on information passed to them by the flight service and then advising their intentions. Other pilots in the vicinity also hear this exchange of messages and can make their own decisions and in turn make known their intentions. Aerodromes with flight service will have a flight service next to the frequency required in the information block of the aerodrome chart in the AIP-NZ Volume 4. Pilots should be on this flight service frequency when within 10 miles of the aerodrome. Aerodromes with AFIS are referred to as aerodrome flight service. So, Paraparaumu flight service, Foxton, wherever you might be. As aerodromes with AFIS are in uncontrolled airspace, there will usually be no ATIS. Either flight service will pass on the weather and aerodrome information, or an AWIB will be available. It is then the pilot's choice which runway to depart or land on. Note from the above that this means there are both attended controlled aerodromes and also attended uncontrolled aerozones. The same off-watch procedures apply from 8611 above, except there is usually no ATIS to advise that flight service is not in attendance. A pilot departing from an aerodrome with AFIS should call flight service with the following information: your call sign, inform flight service you are taxiing, location on the aerodrome, your intentions after takeoff, and the persons on board. If there is no ATIS, flight service will pass you to the appropriate weather and traffic information, which you can then use to decide how to proceed. Flight service will also give you the current QNH, which must be read back. For example, when you establish communication with flight service, Paraparaumu flight service, C152 Foxtrot Lima Charlie. ATIS will return Foxtrot Lima Charlie, Paraparaumu flight service. VFR departures within a flight service aerodrome. You make the next radio call, Foxtrot Lima Charlie at Aero Club, about to taxi, VFR to Nelson, 2 POP. Foxtrot Lima Charlie, preferred runway 34, wind 330 degrees, 20 knots, QNH 1014, time 42, C172, taxiing along Charlie. You will respond, Foxtrot Lima Charlie, taxiing via hotel, holding point seal runway 34, QNH 1014. Foxtrot Lima Charlie, C152, downwind for touch and go. When the traffic is sighted and you're satisfied that the separation between your aircraft and other traffic will be maintained, you can enter the runway and line up for takeoff. If this aerodrome is in a mandatory broadcast zone, you must transmit that you are entering the runway. Foxtrot Lima Charlie, traffic in sight, entering and lining up seal 34. Flight service will then advise if there's any traffic that may affect your takeoff. Foxtrot Lima Charlie, C152 on base, C172 crossing the runway on Charlie. You must wait until you are satisfied that there is no conflict, exists between your aircraft and the other aircraft before takeoff. It is your decision when to depart, not flight service. They are just an information service. In our example, once the C172 is clear of the runway and there is no other traffic that may be a threat, you would call Foxtrot Lima Charlie, traffic in sight, taking off or rolling. You must remain on the flight service frequency when within 10 miles of the aerodrome. When planning on landing at a flight service aerodrome, you should call the flight service, again, when within 10 miles from the aerodrome. You give them the call sign, position, altitude, intentions, and persons on board. If the aerodrome has an ATIS, you should also relay the identifier, e.g. information tango to flight service. This confirms that you have listened to it, you are aware of it, and you're confirming it. Again, if there's no ATIS, flight service will pass you the appropriate weather and traffic information, which you can then use to decide how to proceed. Flight service will also give you the QNH, which means it must be read back. Kilo Alpha Lima, 10 miles north, 2,000 feet, estimating Par Umu 42, POB4. They will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima, preferred runway 34, wind 020 degrees, 20 knots, QNH 1014, Cherokee departing north inland of the coast at 1,500 feet, and a C152 shortly to depart, remaining in the circuit. You will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima, Cherokee in sight, runway 34, QNH 1014. As you get closer to the aerodrome and start your descent, you would then make another call and flight service will give you further details about traffic in the circuit so you're able to decide how to proceed. Once you have decided what to do, inform flight service. Kilo Alpha Lima, seaward of Tihoro, descending to 1,000 feet, join runway 34 SEAL. They will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima, Cessna 152, downwind for a touch and go. You'll respond, Kilo Alpha Lima will join early downwind number 2. They will confirm receipt of that by just your call sign, Kilo Alpha Lima. After this, normal circuit radio calls are required, unless the situation changes and you become aware of other aircraft or decide to change your plans. Standard early downwind call, Kilo Alpha Lima joining early downwind. They will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima, Cessna 152 on short final. Kilo Alpha Lima, traffic in sight. They will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima. You'll then respond when you get to final, Kilo Alpha Lima on final. They will respond, Kilo Alpha Lima, wind gusting 30 knots. You'll just confirm receipt of that by just your call sign, Kilo Alpha Lima, roger. Once you have landed, keep making radio calls to inform others of your intentions on the ground. If you have a long taxi to a fuel pump or aero club building, advise the taxiways you intend using. Aerodromes that have no air traffic control or flight service in attendance. In AIPNZ Volume 4, the aerodrome charts inform excuse me. When making radio calls to an unattended aerodrome, use the name of the aerodrome and then the word traffic, e.g. Masterton traffic. If no radio frequency is listed on the aerodrome chart, the frequency is 119.1 and should be used. Radio calls similar to flight service aerodromes. However, no one will respond to your call. Keep radio calls concise and use standard phraseology. It is up to you to decide which runway to take off from and to be aware of other traffic that may be in the area. Other pilots should let you know if they're in the area once you make your first radio call. They do not need to respond. Do not ask open-ended questions like any traffic. Nor do no radio aircraft cannot reply. Others may not, or if several aircraft are present, they all might try to speak at the same time, causing complete mayhem in the air. For aircraft already in the circuit, it's good practice to report your position when you hear an aircraft joining or departing. This gives them a polite heads up on the runway in use and potential traffic conflicts. Masterton traffic, Echo Lima Alpha, taxiing for runway 06. Once you get to a lineup, Masterton traffic, Echo Lima Alpha, lining up runway 06. And then Masterton traffic, Echo Lima Alpha, rolling runway 06, departing to the south, climbing to 2,000 feet. You have given, at every crucial point, an indication of where you are at any single point in time, allowing other people to be able to make informed decisions. Same for arrivals. Wanganui traffic, Kilo Alpha Zulu, 8 miles southeast, 1,500 feet, joining overhead. And then Wanganui traffic, Kilo Alpha Zulu, overhead joining for runway 29. It is not necessary to say letting down on the non-traffic side, as this is part of the standard procedure. So, Wanganui traffic, Kilo Alpha Zulu, turning downwind, runway 29. All other traffic in proximity will know where you are and be able to make informed decisions about your location. Further calls on base or final may be advised depending on other traffic. If Unicom staff are present at an unattended aerodrome, you may request information to assist with your flight. For example, Aerodrome Unicom, Juliet Echo November, request surface wind conditions. Unicom will respond, Juliet Echo November, whatever Unicom, surface winds 360 degrees, 15 knots. You'll just respond Juliet Echo November. There are certain messages that radio operators should not send under any circumstances. And these are transmissions with profane or obscene language, that are deceptive or false in nature, involving the improper use of call sign of other aircraft or station, that are not required for operational requirements, or of a personal nature. Transmissions heard over the radio are not to be given to any third party unless you have been authorized to do so. From time to time you may hear a message which is confidential and should not be disclosed. This applies especially if there has been an accident or an incident where details such as location of the incident, type of aircraft involved, its call sign, and name of the pilot may be transmitted as part of the communication between stations. The media may contact you to get information about the incident that you may have heard on the radio. It is illegal to provide any information to the media and your friends and family without prior permission. There are internationally agreed procedures for radio transmissions when a pilot is faced with an emergency situation. The New Zealand Civil Aviation Act, Section 13, states that a pilot may go as far as necessary to maintain flight safety if there is no lawful way to resolve an emergency situation. If a pilot does have to breach the rules to ensure flight safety, the breach can only be as far as is necessary. All distress radio transmissions must be made on the air-ground frequency you are already on. If making a distress, a mayday call, and you are on an unattended frequency and consider that better assistance will be provided on another frequency, you should change that frequency after advising this intention on your current frequency. The contents of a mayday or pan-pan call can be found on the pink pages of the AIP NZ Volume 2, 3 or 4. It's important for pilots to become familiar with these contents, as when faced with a distress situation, some stress will be involved making decisions much harder. A distress situation is defined in the IAP as a condition of being threatened by serious and or imminent danger and requiring immediate assistance. The distress call takes priority over all other radio calls. It is put together as Mayday, 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 name of station being addressed, time permitting, identification, your call sign, nature of the distress condition, the intentions of the pilot, present position, altitude and heading. Obviously all of this information will make identification and finding you much quicker. Making a clear, accurate transmission will be critical to obtaining assistance and locating the aircraft if an off-aerodrome landing occurs. To aid control in locating you on their screens, set your transponder to 7700 And also switch the ELT on so your location will start being broadcast on 121.5 and 406 MHz early. An example of a Mayday call. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Papa M flight service, Echo Kilo Lima, engine on fire, unable to maintain height. Making forced landing north of Tihoro, position seaward of Tihoro Beach, passing 1,500 feet, heading 090. Flight service will come back. Echo Kilo Lima, Papa M flight service, Roger, Mayday. If the emergency situation is recovered, you can then switch the ELT back to ARM and must advise ATC and the RCCNZ as soon as possible. They will assume the transmissions have stopped because your aircraft has crashed if you do not make contact with them. The urgency call, PAN-PAN. An emergency situation is defined in the IP as a condition concerning the safety of an aircraft or some persons on board within sight, but which does not require immediate assistance. Urgency calls take priority over regular radio calls except the distress Mayday. It's put together with PAN-PAN, phrased 3 times, name of the station being addressed, identification, call sign, nature of the urgency condition, intentions of pilot, present position, altitude and heading, and any other useful information that will aid. All urgency radio transmissions must be made on the air-ground frequency you are already on. For example, PAN-PAN, 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 Rotorua Tower, Delta Foxtrot Lima, passenger with suspected heart attack, request priority landing, position 5 miles east of Rotorua, heading 270, leaving 3,000 feet. Rotorua Tower will respond, Delta Foxtrot Lima, Rotorua Tower, Roger PAN-PAN, number 1, join left base, runway 18, wind 180 degrees, 10 knots, QNH 1008. As this contains a QNH, you will read it back. Runway 18, QNH 1008, Delta Foxtrot Lima. With both the distress and urgency radio calls, if no one responds to your situation, there are several options open to you. You can choose from to obtain assistance. You can change to another frequency that you know is being monitored. 121.5, the international emergency frequency. Airliners and ground stations monitor this frequency. Alternatively, if you know another frequency that is being monitored, that is appropriate, make your broadcast on that frequency. An aircraft in distress is permitted to impose silence, either to all stations or any station which interferes with the distressed aircraft. Alternatively, the station in control of this distressed traffic, i.e. the tower or flight service, is permitted to impose silence either to all stations or any station which interferes with that distressed traffic. When telling all other stations to be quiet, your call should state stop transmitting and Mayday. For example, all stations or the particular station that's infracting, Echo Lima Alpha, stop transmitting Mayday. All other traffic not involved in this emergency situation should continue to listen until it is clearly established that the assistance is being provided to the distress station. Radio silence should be observed by all other stations until distress traffic is transferred to another frequency, controlling station is given permission, or it has itself to render assistance, or the distress is cancelled or terminated. When the pilot of the distress aircraft considers the emergency complete, he or she will cancel the distress. Controlling station will then transmit a message on that frequency used for the distress traffic, which will include the words distress traffic ended on the frequency or frequencies that were being used for that distress traffic. There could be many reasons why your aircraft has lost communication. The most important point to remember is to fly the aircraft first before trying to fix the radio. There have been many crashes involving aircraft with a simple malfunction which pilots have become fixated on solving, which has led the aircraft crash due to stalling or controlled flight into terrain. The radio could have had a short circuit in its wiring, the aircraft's alternator may not be supplying enough power, the radio may have been bumped into the off position, or the aerial may have been hit by a bird. There's also a chance that the ground station has been hit by an earthquake or some other incident which has caused the loss of communication. The checks to restore aircraft communication are as follows. Fly the aircraft, maintain VMC and terrain clearance. Keep a good lookout for other aircraft, then check the following. Your electrical masters and avionics switches are on, comm radio is on and the volume is set correctly, squelch is set correctly, circuit breakers and fuses are in and functioning, correct frequency is set, and your headset and microphone leads are correctly plugged into the surround. Are you behind terrain that's blocking your VFH signals? There are many aspects which can stop that radio transmission. The checks to restore aircraft communication. If these actions are not successful, the following actions can be taken. Change the frequency if the station that you're trying to reach has more than one frequency. If using a headset, try the microphone and the speaker or vice versa. Change frequency to another station known to be in range. Call other traffic. If successful, ask them to relay the message for you. You could transmit blind. This means transmitting assuming your receiver is broken but the transmitter is operating. Start your radio call with transmitting blind. Fly higher if loss of communication could be due to flying behind high terrain. If none of these checks resolve the communication problem, it can be assumed that the radio has failed and communications are lost. Procedures to follow in case of loss of communication due to aircraft equipment failing is in the AIPs, Volume 4, ENR 1.5 to 9, the pink pages. This is the procedure to be followed in the event of an apparent aircraft communication failure. Maintain terrain clearance at all times. Set your transponder to 7600. Try alternate, then secondary published ATS frequencies for the sector or the unit you should be communicating with. Check aircraft communication equipment. Listen to ATIS if possible. Transmit position reports and intentions assuming the aircraft transmitter is operating, and start each transmission with transmitting blind. Turn on landing lights, beacons and strobes. If a cell phone is available in the aircraft, ring one of the following to establish phone communications. Auckland, Ohakea, Wellington or Christchurch control. Christchurch information on 0900 number. The ATC unit you should be communicating with, and that's referencing the AIP General 3.3 for phone numbers. If your destination is within a mandatory broadcast zone, proceed to an alternate aerodrome unless the risk of proceeding safely to an alternate is clearly greater than continuing without communications to a planned destination. The pilot of an aircraft operating under VFR should not enter controlled airspace, including control zones, unless complying with a clearance already received and acknowledged, or published comm failure procedures for that aerodrome. If the pilot has not received a clearance to enter controlled airspace before communication failure, he or she should divert to an unattended aerodrome and report arrival to ATS as soon as possible once on the ground. If unable to divert to an unattended aerodrome, fuel restrictions, weather restrictions, continue to operate the transponder on 7600. Enter the zone via a published arrival procedure. Approach the aerodrome from the side of the main runway or runway in use and carry out a standard overhead circuit joining procedure. Contact ATS as soon as possible after landing. So in summary, maintain VMC and terrain clearance. Squawk 7600. Do not enter controlled airspace. Divert to the nearest suitable aerodrome, if safe to do so. If operating in a mandatory broadcast zone, divert to an alternate outside of the MBZ. If already in controlled airspace, follow the last instruction received and then use a published arrival procedure to then approach the aerodrome from the side of the runway to carry out a standard overhead circuit join. When a pilot is able to communicate only by unmodulated transmissions, the following techniques will be employed by ATS. Firstly, when an unmodulated transmission is heard, the ATS operator will request the pilot activate the transmitter 3 times, and then, if the pilot complies, ATS will frame questions requiring yes or no responses to determine if the aircraft can continue visually or can execute an instrument approach or has reached a nominated position. This and other information required can be obtained by requiring the pilots to use the following codes. Yes or roger, 1 key on the transmitter. No, 2 keys on the transmitter. Say again, 3 keys on the transmitter. At nominated position, activate the transmitter 4 times. When it is established that a pilot of an aircraft can receive transmissions, control will be exercised in the normal manner, except that the frequency changes will not be requested unless there is no alternative. Visual signals are used by aerodrome control to aircraft when radio communications are not available. Each pilot of an aircraft shall comply with the clearance or instructions specified for ATC light signals as required by Part 91.243 ATC light signals. Steady green, cleared to land if the aircraft is in flight, cleared for takeoff if the aircraft is on the ground. Steady red, give way to other traffic and continue circling. This does not mean orbit, it means continue via the aerodrome traffic circuit if the aircraft is in flight. Steady red on the ground means stop. A series of green flashes while in the air. Return for landing, clearance to land and taxi will be given in due course. If the aircraft's on the ground, a series of green flashes, clear to taxi. A series of red flashes is to a pilot in the sky, aerodrome unsafe, do not land. A series of red flashes to an aircraft on the ground, taxi clear of landing area in use. Flashing white light to a pilot in flight, land at this aerodrome and proceed to the apron. Clearance to land and to taxi will be given in due course. Flashing white for an aircraft on the ground, return to starting point on the aerodrome. Alternate red and green flashes to an aircraft in flight, danger, be on the alert. And the same for an aircraft on the ground. A red pyrotechnic to an aircraft in flight, notwithstanding any previous instructions, do not land for the time being. Traffic information broadcast by aircraft. TIBAs are reports and information transmitted by pilots for the information of other aircraft in the vicinity following a significant disruption to ATC services. Pilots will, as advised by air traffic services, when possible beforehand, if there is going to be a reduction in the level of communications available. Basically, if ATS have to abandon their facility for whatever reason, earthquake, fire, bomb scare, they should issue instructions to transfer communication to either alternative station or commence a TIBA environment, provided they do not risk their own safety in doing so. TIBA will only be introduced when necessary and as a temporary measure, and if time permits, the introduction of TIBA will be on the NOTAMs. Pilots pilots can initiate a TIBA where there is a complete failure of communication with air traffic control. Frequency instructions will either be included in the NOTAM message issued by ATS, or if there is a complete and sudden communication failure, pilots should look in the AIPs, the Volume 4 pink pages. There is a North Island ENR 1.15 and a South Island ENR 1.152. These maps show the frequencies to be used in certain areas of New Zealand. The purpose of the map is to allow the distribution of relevant traffic to relevant frequencies, ensure a higher chance of contacting a ground base unit, and to quickly ascertain by the pilot of the level of autonomy required. A listening watch should be maintained on TIBA frequencies 10 minutes before entering TIB airspace until leaving that airspace. For an aircraft taking off from an aerodrome located within the lateral limits of a TIBA airspace, listening watch should start as soon as appropriate prior to or after takeoff. When operating in TIBA airspace, you are basically operating in uncontrolled airspace. So giving as much notice as possible of your intentions will assist other pilots and you to maintain separation. Broadcast should be made 10 minutes before entering TIBA airspace, or if taking off from an aerodrome located inside TIBA airspace, as soon as appropriate prior to takeoff after. 10 minutes prior to and when crossing any reporting point, and 10-minute intervals between reporting points, 10 minutes prior to crossing or joining an ATS route, and the only other non-10-minute part, when possible, 2 to 5 minutes before changing altitude or flight level at a time of changing in altitude. At a time of change in altitude when reaching the required altitude. So, anything relating to TIBA on the exam is 10 minutes unless it is changing altitude or flight level or when obtaining a particular flight level or altitude. Now you have the revision questions and answers to go through. These are the final ones. I have my exam today and I will let you know how we go. Good luck.